Everyone feared the hospital's CEO, until the new nurse stepped in and achieved the impossible. The building towered above her, its
Come
gray
on, you have to
walls
stand
and
up. I've
glass
got
windows
you.
reflecting the
I
bright
can't. It
morning
hurts too
sun.
much.
It looked ordinary enough, but the stories she had heard about this place made her heart beat faster. She had been warned by friends and former colleagues. The hospital was efficient, yes, but it was also ruled by fear. People respected the CEO, Mr. Donovan, but it wasn't respect born of admiration. It was the kind that made people anxious every time he walked into a room. She took a deep breath, adjusted her ID badge, and walked through the automatic doors. The smell of antiseptic and the low hum of machines greeted her immediately. Nurses and doctors moved quickly, their expressions tight, almost rigid. It felt different from the small community hospital she had trained in, where staff smiled, joked, and genuinely cared for each other. Here, everyone seemed cautious, as though one wrong word or mistake could set off a storm. Emily had prepared for this. During her training, she had learned that big hospitals ran on rules, protocols, and discipline. But she had also learned that fear could poison teamwork. She hoped she could find a balance. She checked in at the nurse's station and met her supervisor, a middle-aged woman named Linda who didn't smile much. "Emily, welcome to St. Michael S. Keep your head down and follow the rules," she said, handing over a clipboard with the day's assignments. "Don't get on anyone's bad side, especially the top floor." Emily nodded, feeling a flutter of nervousness. She had heard about the CEO, Mr. Donovan. He was a tall man with sharp eyes and a voice that could cut through a room without raising it. People whispered that he remembered every mistake ever made by the staff. Rumor had it that he rarely smiled, and that meetings with him often ended with someone being reprimanded. Emily swallowed hard, but she refused to let fear control her. She was here to learn to help patients and maybe, just maybe, make a difference. Her first task was simple: assist in the general ward, check vitals, and ensure patients were comfortable. But as soon as she entered the ward, she realized that nothing here was simple. Nurses moved quickly, almost like a dance, but there was tension under every movement. Patients were monitored closely, but conversations were brief and formal. Emily noticed a young nurse frowning at a computer screen, hesitating before entering data. "Everything okay?" Emily asked softly. The nurse looked up, startled, and then lowered her voice. "Just be careful, one wrong step and it could be trouble." She didn't explain further, but Emily understood. Mistakes weren't just frowned upon here, they could have serious consequences. Emily tried to focus on her work, checking blood pressure, administering medications, and helping patients with small tasks. She quickly realized that efficiency here was measured not just in how fast tasks were done, but also in how carefully they were done. A slip in record-keeping or a delay in medication could draw sharp attention from supervisors. She worked meticulously, double-checking every detail, but she also began observing patterns. Some processes were slow, some communication lines were tangled, and some small problems were ignored because no one dared to speak up. During her lunch break, Emily sat quietly in the staff room watching her colleagues. Conversations were muted, laughter rare. A nurse mentioned a mistake made the previous week, a mix-up with medication that luckily didn't harm the patient. The story was told in whispers, almost like a cautionary tale. "He called the nurse into his office," one said. "Didn't even raise his voice, just stared. You could feel the tension in the room. She cried when she came back." Emily felt a shiver. She could see why everyone feared the CEO, but she also felt something else: determination. Fear might have created silence, but it had also hidden opportunities for improvement. Emily started noticing small things others missed. A nurse struggling to find a chart, a patient left waiting too long for attention, a form that was confusing and caused errors. She quietly made notes in her own notebook, not yet ready to share them, but wanting to understand how things worked. Her first real challenge came when a patient in room 204 became restless and confused. The patient, an elderly man recovering from surgery, tried to get out of bed without help. Emily rushed over. "Mr. Harris, please don't get up alone. Let me help you." She gently guided him back into bed and checked his vitals. The nurse who was supposed to be on duty arrived a few minutes later, looking flustered. "Thank you, Emily," she said softly, her eyes showing relief. That small moment gave Emily a boost. She realized that even in a place where fear ruled, she could still make a difference. She began paying closer attention to patient needs, even when the system seemed rigid. She helped colleagues when they struggled, offered suggestions quietly, and always documented everything carefully. Slowly, she started to notice subtle shifts. A smile here, a nod of appreciation there. People began to recognize that Emily wasn't trying to challenge anyone, she just wanted to help. By the end of her first week, Emily had experienced the full spectrum of hospital life under Mr. Donovan's rule. She had seen stress, mistakes, and fear. She had also seen resilience, dedication, and quiet acts of kindness that often went unnoticed. She realized that the hospital was like a living organism, complex, sometimes harsh, but capable of change if approached carefully. Late on Friday afternoon, Emily was walking down the hallway when she overheard a conversation between two senior nurses. "Do you think anyone can change things here?" one asked. The other shook her head. "Not really. Mr. Donovan, he doesn't tolerate weakness. People just survive, that's all." Emily paused for a moment. She felt the weight of those words, but she also felt a spark of resolve. She knew she was new, inexperienced, and just one person. But maybe, just maybe, one person could start a small ripple that could grow. She didn't know how yet, but she promised herself that she would try, not for recognition, but for the patients and the staff who deserved better. Her first week ended with exhaustion, but also with a sense of purpose. She had survived her introduction to the feared hospital environment and had even found small ways to help. As she left the hospital that evening, she looked back at the building. It was imposing, yes, but it wasn't invincible. And Emily, with determination in her heart and a mind full of ideas, felt ready to step into the challenges ahead. Emily arrived at the hospital on Monday morning, carrying her bag and a sense of determination that had grown over the weekend. She had spent the previous days reflecting on her first week, thinking about what she had observed and what could be improved. Though the hospital seemed rigid and fear-driven, she felt certain that small, thoughtful actions could make a difference. Her first task was to check on patients in the general ward. As she walked down the long, brightly lit corridor, she noticed subtle signs of inefficiency. Charts were stacked haphazardly on a nurse's desk. A call bell had not been answered promptly, and one patient was sitting in discomfort because her lunch tray had been delayed. Emily took notes in her small notebook, careful not to draw attention, and promised herself she would find ways to fix these problems quietly without upsetting anyone. Shortly after, a nurse rushed past her, looking panicked. "Emily, can you help in room 312? There's an issue with Mr. Thompson's medication schedule." Emily followed quickly. She found Mr. Thompson, an elderly man with a history of heart problems, looking anxious. His medication hadn't been given at the correct time because a scheduling mix-up had occurred. Emily calmly explained to Mr. Thompson that she would ensure he received his medication immediately. She checked his records, confirmed the correct dosage, and administered the medication. Then, she noticed something that others often overlooked, a communication gap. The pharmacy had delivered the new supply of drugs, but the shift nurse hadn't updated the schedule. This small error could have caused serious problems if left unchecked. After completing her tasks, Emily approached her supervisor, Linda. "I noticed a few scheduling issues that could cause delays or mistakes," she said gently. "I have some ideas to streamline communication between the pharmacy and the ward." Linda raised an eyebrow. "Be careful, Emily. People here don't like changes unless they come from above. Mr. Donovan expects the rules to be followed, not questioned." Emily nodded, understanding the caution in Linda's voice. She wasn't trying to challenge authority. She simply wanted to help patients and make the workflow safer. She decided to start small and observe how changes could be implemented quietly, without threatening anyone's position. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Later that day, a patient in the ICU required urgent attention. A misunderstanding between the ICU and the general ward delayed treatment. Emily witnessed the tension firsthand. Nurses were stressed, doctors were frustrated, and Mr. Donovan was notified because the issue had escalated. Staff avoided making eye contact with him, knowing his reputation for strict accountability. Instead of panicking, Emily calmly documented the timeline of the incident. She noted what had caused the delay and how it could have been prevented. She approached her senior nurse colleague, Maria, who had worked at the hospital for years. "Maria, I think if we had a small protocol to quickly alert the ICU about urgent cases, this delay could be avoided," Emily suggested. Maria hesitated. I don't know, Emily, mister. Donovan doesn't like staff taking initiative unless he asks. You could get in trouble. Emily smiled reassuringly. I understand. I'm not trying to challenge anyone. I just want to make things safer for the patients. Maybe we can try it quietly for a few cases and see if it works. Maria thought for a moment and then nodded. All right, if it works, but let's be careful. Together, they created a simple communication protocol. When a patient's condition required urgent attention, a nurse would send a direct alert to both the ICU and the attending physician. The alert included the patient's name, condition, and immediate needs. It was quick, simple, and required minimal effort from the staff. The next morning, Emily and Maria tested the new system during a regular shift. Within minutes, it proved effective. A patient showing early signs of a complication was quickly attended to by the ICU team. Staff members who had been nervous about taking initiative noticed how smoothly the system worked and quietly appreciated Emily's solution. Word of the improvement reached some of the department heads. While they didn't openly praise Emily, they began to acknowledge that small, thoughtful changes could improve efficiency and patient safety. Emily noticed a subtle shift in the atmosphere. People were still cautious, but they started to ask her questions and even offered suggestions for further improvements. Despite her small victories, Emily was careful to document everything thoroughly. She knew that in a hospital ruled by fear, evidence was essential. If questioned by supervisors or the CEO, she could present facts, not opinions. This approach made her feel confident, even when others doubted the possibility of change. One afternoon, Emily was called to assist in a difficult situation involving a patient with a complex medical condition. The patient's test results were delayed due to miscommunication between the lab and the ward. Emily immediately recognized the problem and used her new alert system to notify the lab and the physician simultaneously. The test results were processed quickly, and the patient received the correct treatment without further delay. Her actions didn't go unnoticed. A few colleagues approached her later, quietly thanking her for improving the process. Some shared their own frustrations and admitted that they had often wanted to make similar changes but had been too afraid to speak up. Emily encouraged them to share ideas safely and promised to document improvements carefully, so everyone could see the positive outcomes. By the end of her second week, Emily had made noticeable improvements in communication and workflow, but she also understood the delicate balance she had to maintain. Mr. Donovan was always present in the background, his sharp eyes and reputation creating an invisible pressure on everyone. Staff members whispered about his attention to detail, his intolerance for mistakes, and his ability to remember every incident. Emily had to be strategic, ensuring that her changes helped patients while respecting the existing hierarchy. Her careful approach paid off when another emergency arose. A patient required a rapid transfer to the ICU due to a sudden complication. Emily's alert system worked perfectly. The ICU team received the notification immediately, and the patient was stabilized without incident. The department heads observed the process, noting its efficiency. Emily didn't seek recognition, she only focused on the patient's well-being, but she felt a sense of accomplishment. Later that day, Emily's supervisor, Linda, approached her privately. Emily, I have to admit, your system worked well. I'm impressed with your initiative, even if it was risky. Emily smiled. Thank you, Linda. I just want to make things better for the patients, that's all. Linda nodded thoughtfully. Just remember here, even good intentions can be questioned, but you're doing well. Keep documenting everything and don't let fear stop you. Emily's confidence grew, but so did her awareness of the challenges ahead. She understood that real change in a hospital like St. Michael's would take time, patience, and careful navigation of both fear and authority. Her goal was not to confront the CEO directly, but to create small, practical improvements that would be difficult to ignore. Over the next few days, Emily continued to observe, document, and implement her ideas quietly. She noticed patterns in errors and delays and developed solutions that were simple, effective, and easy for staff to adopt. Slowly, the culture in her immediate team began to shift. Staff members were still cautious, but they started sharing ideas and collaborating more openly. Emily realized that her approach required more than technical skill. It required empathy, patience, and courage. She had to understand the fears of her colleagues, the pressures of the hospital hierarchy, and the importance of careful documentation. Each small improvement became a stepping stone toward a larger goal, improving patient care and helping the hospital operate more efficiently without threatening anyone's position. By the end of her second week, Emily had achieved something remarkable. She had quietly begun to change the culture of a hospital ruled by fear. She hadn't confronted the CEO, she hadn't challenged authority, but she had demonstrated that careful observation, thoughtful solutions, and quiet courage could make a real difference. Staff members began to notice that change was possible, and Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose. As she left the hospital that evening, Emily reflected on her journey. She had stepped into a place where fear controlled the staff, where mistakes were punished, and where morale was low. Yet, through small, deliberate actions, she had begun to create improvements that benefited patients, staff, and the hospital as a whole. She knew the road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time, she felt that the impossible might just be possible. Emily arrived at St. Michael's Hospital on Monday morning, feeling a mixture of anticipation and quiet determination. The past weeks had taught her much about the hospital's rhythm, the fear-driven culture, and the subtle ways small changes could make a difference. But she also knew that true improvement would not come from small acts alone. It would require her ideas to withstand real tests under pressure. Her shift began with routine checks and patient rounds. She greeted patients warmly, offering comfort and reassurance, and noticed small inefficiencies that could be improved quietly. Yet Emily also understood that the real challenge often arose during emergencies, when systems were tested and the hospital's weaknesses became apparent. She kept her notebook close, ready to record patterns, gaps, and solutions. That morning, the hospital was unusually busy. A local school bus had been involved in a minor accident, sending several injured children to St. Michael's at once. The emergency department was immediately overwhelmed, with nurses and doctors rushing from one patient to another. Alarms rang, monitors beeped, and the corridors buzzed with tension. Emily knew that this was the moment her communication system would be tested for the first real large-scale emergency. As she assisted with triage, Emily noticed the usual confusion that arose when multiple departments needed to coordinate. Patients waited for tests, charts were misplaced, and staff were unsure who should attend to which case first. Yet Emily stayed calm. She quickly sent alerts through her newly designed communication protocol, ensuring that each critical case reached the right team immediately. The ICU received notifications, lab results were prioritized, and doctors were able to make swift decisions. For the first time, Emily saw her system working on a larger scale. The children received attention in a timely manner, and no major mistakes occurred despite the chaos. Staff members who had been hesitant to adopt her method looked on in amazement, realizing that her approach genuinely improved efficiency and patient safety. Amid the controlled chaos, Emily noticed a junior nurse struggling to manage multiple patients simultaneously. Without hesitation, Emily stepped in, guiding the nurse and delegating tasks calmly. "Focus on the vitals for these patients first," she instructed softly. "I'll handle the medications for the others. We'll get through this together." The nurse looked relieved, her tension easing as Emily helped organize the workflow. This small act of leadership, unnoticed by the CEO, demonstrated Emily's ability to support her colleagues while maintaining the hospital's standards. Later, as the emergency subsided, Emily received a call from the ICU. One of the children's conditions had worsened unexpectedly. Emily immediately coordinated with the ICU team, ensuring that the child was transferred safely and that all necessary medical information accompanied the transfer. Every step was carefully documented, so that in case of questions, there was clear evidence of the process and its success. Word of Emily's effective handling of the emergency quickly spread among the staff. Colleagues whispered about how calmly she managed the situation, how efficiently she coordinated between departments, and how her communication protocol had made a real difference. For the first time, Emily sensed a shift, not in the hospital's culture entirely, but in how people viewed what was possible. That afternoon, Emily was called into a meeting with her supervisor, Linda. "Emily, I've been observing your work closely," Linda began, her expression serious but appreciative. "Your system, it really helped during the emergency. The ICU team told me that your communication alerts were timely and clear. The staff noticed how organized you were. Emily felt a surge of quiet pride but remained humble. Thank you, Linda. I only want to make sure patients receive care without delays or errors. That's all. Linda nodded thoughtfully. You're making a difference, Emily, but remember this hospital is ruled by fear. The CEO notices everything. He won't ignore this for better or worse. Be prepared for him to ask questions and always have documentation ready. Facts matter here more than intent. Emily left the meeting with a mix of nerves and anticipation. She had known that her ideas might eventually reach Mr. Donovan, the CEO. She also knew that this moment was critical. How she presented her work and results could determine whether she gained support or whether her initiative would be dismissed or criticized. A few days later, the opportunity came. Mr. Donovan walked through the hospital corridors, his sharp gaze sweeping over the staff. Emily had been briefed that he would be reviewing department performance, and she knew her communication protocol had become part of the discussion among department heads. When Mr. Donovan arrived at her ward, Emily felt a mix of nerves and resolve. She greeted him respectfully, maintaining a professional demeanor. Mr. Donovan, I wanted to show you a process that has helped improve communication between departments during urgent cases, she said confidently. He looked at her skeptically but motioned for her to continue. Emily explained the protocol, how it worked, and the results from the recent emergency involving the children from the school accident. She presented clear evidence, timelines, charts, and notes demonstrating how her system had improved efficiency and reduced errors. Mr. Donovan listened silently, his expression unreadable. Emily's heart raced, but she stayed focused, presenting the facts clearly without exaggeration or emotion. She emphasized patient safety, team efficiency, and the measurable outcomes of her system. After a long moment of silence, Mr. Donovan spoke. This is well organized. It seems to have made a difference, particularly during the emergency. Did you develop this on your own? Emily nodded. Yes, sir. I observed where communication gaps existed and designed a small system to ensure urgent cases were handled efficiently. I tested it quietly to avoid disrupting workflow and documented everything carefully. He regarded her thoughtfully. You've taken initiative. That's unusual here, but I see the results. Very well. We will implement this protocol hospital-wide, but I expect you to train the staff and ensure everything is consistent. Any mistakes or failures must be addressed immediately. Emily felt a mixture of relief and pride. She had expected scrutiny, perhaps criticism, but Mr. Donovan's response was pragmatic and professional. She realized that her careful documentation, evidence-based approach, and respectful presentation had made the difference. Over the next few weeks, Emily worked closely with the staff to expand the protocol across departments. She trained nurses and junior doctors, showing them how to use the alerts effectively. She continued to observe, refine, and document, ensuring that the system remained efficient and reliable. Staff members began to adopt the changes, realizing that Emily's approach made their work easier and improved patient care. The hospital atmosphere began to shift subtly. Fear was still present, but now there was also cautious optimism. Staff members were willing to try improvements if they were evidence-based and practical. Emily's colleagues started sharing ideas, knowing that thoughtful solutions could gain recognition rather than punishment. Emily also developed a stronger rapport with Mr. Donovan. While he remained strict and demanding, he showed a willingness to listen to well-prepared suggestions. Emily had earned his respect, not by challenging him, but by demonstrating competence, reliability, and a focus on results. One evening, after completing a long shift, Emily walked through the hospital corridors, reflecting on how far things had come. The ward was quieter now, more organized, and staff were collaborating more effectively. She realized that real change required patience, observation, and persistence. It wasn't enough to have ideas. She had to implement them carefully, with respect for the existing system and authority. Emily's journey was far from over. There were still challenges ahead, and she knew that maintaining the improvements would require constant attention and adaptability. But she also knew that the impossible, improving a fear-driven hospital system, was now within reach. One small initiative had grown into a hospital-wide process that saved time, reduced errors, and improved patient care. And most importantly, It had started to change the way staff thought about their work and their ability to make a difference. That night, as she left the hospital, Emily felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had faced her fears, navigated a challenging environment, and demonstrated that thoughtful, evidence-based action could overcome even deeply entrenched fear. She knew that the coming weeks and months would bring new challenges, but she felt ready. For the first time, Emily truly believed that one person's dedication and courage could create lasting change, even in a hospital ruled by fear. Emily arrived at St. Michael's Hospital early in the morning, carrying her bag and a sense of quiet determination that had grown stronger over the past weeks. The hospital had already started to feel different to her. Staff were still cautious, but there was a subtle shift in the atmosphere. People moved with more purpose, and whispers of frustration had begun to turn into discussions of ideas. Emily knew that the changes she had started were beginning to take root, but she also understood that real transformation would require patience, consistency, and careful guidance. Her first task that day was to check on the patients in the general ward. She greeted each one with warmth and attention, listening to their concerns and offering comfort. Patients responded positively, many noting that the nurses seemed more organized and attentive. Emily realized that her communication system wasn't just making the hospital run more efficiently, it was improving the experience for the patients themselves. Throughout the morning, Emily observed how the protocol she had implemented was being used by the staff. Nurses sent alerts to the ICU and doctors efficiently, test results arrived on time, and patient transfers were smoother than ever before. The changes had become a part of the daily routine, and staff members who had once been skeptical were now using the system confidently. Emily felt a quiet pride in seeing how small, careful improvements could create a ripple effect across the hospital. By mid-morning, an unexpected challenge arose. A patient with multiple complications had been admitted to the ICU, and several departments needed to coordinate quickly to stabilize him. Emily immediately sprang into action, ensuring that all alerts were sent to the relevant teams and that every step was documented. She assisted junior nurses in organizing their tasks, double-checked the patient's medication schedule, and kept the doctors informed of any changes. The situation was tense, but Emily remained calm. Her training, observation, and prior experiences allowed her to think clearly and act efficiently. The patient was stabilized without any errors, and the ICU team praised Emily's efforts. Even the doctors who had been skeptical of the new system acknowledged that it had worked seamlessly under pressure. News of Emily's success reached Mr. Donovan, the CEO. Unlike before, when his presence brought tension and fear, this time he observed the ward quietly, taking note of the efficiency and collaboration. Emily approached him professionally, explaining how the protocol had been applied in this emergency and providing clear documentation of each step. Mr. Donovan listened attentively, his sharp eyes scanning the notes. "This is impressive, Emily," he said finally. "You've managed to implement a system that works under pressure, improves efficiency, and ensures patient safety. I must admit, I didn't expect such results from someone new. You've earned my respect." Emily felt a surge of pride but remained humble. "Thank you, sir. My goal has always been to help the staff and patients. That's all." Over the following weeks, Emily worked tirelessly to expand her system throughout the hospital. She trained new nurses, collaborated with doctors, and ensured that the protocol was followed consistently in every department. Staff members who had once been hesitant began offering their own suggestions for improvement, and Emily carefully considered each one, incorporating practical ideas into the workflow. The hospital's culture began to transform slowly but steadily. Fear was still present, but it was no longer the primary motivator. Staff began to focus on solutions rather than avoiding mistakes. They collaborated more openly, shared knowledge, and supported each other in ways that had been rare before. Emily realized that true change required not only good ideas but also trust, patience, and the ability to guide people through uncertainty. One afternoon, a senior nurse approached Emily. "I have to admit, I didn't think change was possible here," she said. "But your system, it's made a real difference. The staff feel more confident and the patients are better cared for. You've shown us that improvement is possible." Emily smiled. "I'm glad to hear that. Change isn't easy, but if we work together and focus on the patients, We can make this hospital a better place for everyone. Even Mr. Donovan began to show a different side of leadership. While he remained strict and detail-oriented, he started to recognize the value of initiative and practical solutions. Staff noticed that they could approach him with well-documented proposals without fear of immediate reprimand. Emily had not only improved hospital operations, but had also influenced the CEO's approach to leadership. As the months passed, the hospital continued to improve. Communication between departments was smoother, patient care became more efficient, and staff morale increased. Emily continued to mentor junior nurses, encouraging them to observe, document, and suggest improvements. She emphasized patience, careful planning, and respect for hierarchy, showing that meaningful change was possible even in a challenging environment. One evening, as Emily walked through the hospital corridors, she reflected on how far she had come. She had arrived weeks earlier as a new nurse, cautious and uncertain in a hospital ruled by fear. Now she had implemented a system that improved efficiency, saved time, and reduced errors. She had helped staff regain confidence, inspired collaboration, and even influenced the CEO's leadership approach. Her work had not been easy. There had been moments of doubt, challenges, and the ever-present awareness of the hospital's strict hierarchy. But Emily had relied on careful observation, strategic action, and a commitment to patient care to achieve something remarkable. She realized that courage was not always about confronting authority directly. It was often about taking thoughtful, evidence-based actions that created real impact. One morning, the hospital held a small recognition event for staff who had contributed significantly to patient care and operational improvements. Emily was quietly acknowledged for her initiative in implementing the communication protocol. The CEO, Mr. Donovan, spoke about the importance of innovation, careful planning, and dedication. He praised Emily for her courage and the measurable results she had achieved, noting how her system had improved both efficiency and patient safety. Emily accepted the recognition humbly, emphasizing that the success was a team effort. She reminded everyone that improvement was possible when staff worked together, focused on patient care, and approached challenges thoughtfully. Her words resonated with the staff, reinforcing the shift in culture that had begun weeks earlier. As the hospital continued to evolve, Emily maintained her focus on mentorship and continuous improvement. She worked closely with junior nurses, teaching them to observe, document, and communicate effectively. She encouraged them to propose practical solutions, showing that even small ideas could create meaningful change. By the end of the year, St. Michael's Hospital was almost unrecognizable from the place Emily had first entered. Fear still existed, but it no longer dominated the staff's actions. Collaboration, trust, and careful planning had taken its place. Patients received better care, staff felt more confident, and the hospital operated more smoothly and efficiently. Emily had achieved the impossible, not through confrontation or rebellion, but through thoughtful action, patience, and a deep commitment to helping others. She had shown that even one person could make a meaningful difference, inspiring change that improved the lives of patients, staff, and the hospital as a whole. As she left the hospital one evening, Emily paused to look back at the building. It still towered above her, gray and imposing, but it no longer felt intimidating. She had learned that change was possible, that courage and persistence could overcome fear, and that one person's dedication could ripple through an entire institution. She smiled, knowing that her journey was far from over, but confident that she had left a lasting, positive mark on the hospital she now called home.